See, this is why men should never speak on Sylvia Plath. So, I read 3 celebrity books to see if I learn anything. Celebrity books are kind of interesting because I feel like, at least for me, I almost always assume that they're just cash grabs. So I wanted to test my theory, so I picked these 3 that we're going to talk about today to see if they are cash grabs or if I think that they're actually worth reading. Now, there's really no rhyme or reason as to why I chose these specific 3. They're just ones that have been on my radar for a while. And surprisingly, after I picked these up, I noticed that they all kind of have very similar themes or grapple with the same things, which I found quite interesting, although I guess that's to be expected with celebrity books. I feel like a lot of the time they're talking about their experience being famous, living in the public eye and what that's like, as well as dealing with substance issues. But without further ado, these are the 3 books I'll be talking about today. Autopsy of an Ex-Teen Heartthrob by Avan Jogia, The Diaries of Courtney Love, and Down the Drain by Julia Fox. I'll start with Autopsy of an Ex-Teen Heartthrob just because it's the one I finished last, so it's freshest on my mind. So this is Avan's debut poetry collection, which I was definitely intrigued by. I feel like I don't often see celebrities publishing poetry, and so I was really interested to see if these poems are actually well written. So my overall thoughts are that this is not the worst thing I've ever read, but I'm certainly glad that I didn't spend any money on it. I just borrowed it from the library. I will say the poems I liked the most are the ones where he's talking about his experience being famous and growing up in the public eye. I thought these poems were definitely the strongest. So in one poem he writes, "The performance of being picked apart by you, all of you, huddled around me with white gloves, having already decided in my youthful arrogance on the direction my life would take, without first consulting my future. I just hope that maybe you can see yourself in me, in this body laid out in front of you." These types of poems felt really genuine to me and like they had something to say. I mean, it's certainly not a new concept, celebrities talking about the negative aspects of fame, but I think it's interesting to have someone like Avan, who's been in the public eye for such a long time, talk about these things. He continues in another poem saying, "This is the life you chose, and it's not yours. Such good kids. I'm not a human being, I just play one on TV." We also get some personal details about Avan's life throughout the poems, like, for example, the fact that his mom actually got cancer the first week he started working on Victorious. These little details reminded me a bit of how I felt reading Jeanette McCurdy's memoir, in that you really never know what someone is going through, especially when they're famous, because I feel like we only get to see the big picture. When he strays from this theme of the pitfalls of fame, I find that the poems become much more try-hard and pretentious. They often heavily rely on this Bukowski style of writing that I don't think works very well for him. It just makes him come off as so pretentious, which I don't think is the intended effect. Like, for example, in More Monster, he writes, "I am sat on my couch somewhere between a cigarette, a wank, and a beer, and I'm sad." And then in Room Service, he writes, "I don't need a cigarette. What I need is a lobotomy or some sort of high dose of horse tranquilizer. It's supposed to be a good day today, weather-wise, but I still feel like shit. It's hard to kill yourself on a sunny day." Coupled with this, he sometimes uses these weird metaphors where, again, I'm just not sure what the intended effect is. For example, in one poem, he says, "Wet wax like cold cum."
Whatever that means.
Also, y'all, I am literally Ariana Grande on the Yours Truly cover right now, trying to get this angle right. But anyway, moving on. There are several poems addressed to or about women in the collection, which for the most part just didn't work for me. However, there was one that did work for me, and I will read it to you. It's called 2019. I wish to give every flower your name, a fragrant fancy, forgotten folly, fresh in my nose and on my tongue. I wish to know no other flower but by your name, that every petal would say, endlessly, back at me, as I picked away your thorns. Oh, to have known your garden only, holy, reborn into fresh daisies or roses wrapped in lips of ruby red. I wish to know no other flower but by your name, fields of your flowers, your name among plains. That is just so cute. Like, it's so beautiful. I really enjoyed that one when I first read it. There's also the ending of this poem that I quite liked, though I'm not sure how favorable it really is, but I do like it. So this is from 2010, and he writes, and when God in her heaven sends the floods and the thunders, your face on a billboard will highlight man's blunders. Now, the reason I say that most of the poems about women didn't work for me is because I just find the way he describes and talks about women to be really odd. In The Girl in All the Songs, he says, my little non-wife turns over, her beautiful girl body making mountains in the sheets.
Ew.
I don't like that. And in Poor Little Pop Star Girl, he writes, poor little pop star girl, go, get out there, little girl. I don't know, I just feel deeply uncomfortable whenever men try to write about women's experiences in such an invasive way, or to depict how they think women would feel in certain situations. I don't know, it just feels phony to me. And Avan does this quite a lot in this collection. For example, in the poem Holy Pervert, which goes, praying like some holy pervert, her knees knocking together like church bells, prostrate below like some wild crying believer, zealous zealot, her hands grasped around a rosary, weeping for Christ, weeping for the sins of men, and then finally, weeping for her own sins. Confession, the committing of acts depraved and natural to her. Confession, and finally forgiveness, for her Father loves her, and her God would never turn away a whore. Like, I'm just not sure what I meant to take away from this. And yeah, so aside from these types of poems, there are also odes to Sylvia Plath and Patti Smith. Yup, yeah. They're about as good as you would expect them to be. But here's an excerpt from the Sylvia Plath one. I want to fuck you. To be some lover you hated. To be some line. What a selfish and small little desire. Every woman adores a fascist. To be that for you. See, this is why men should never speak on Sylvia Plath. And this is the Patti Smith one. Imagine wasting those fingertips meant for writing prose. Not that there's shame in the domestic game, but that's not Patty's bag, daddy-o. Good God, you look good in my suit, in that fuck me haircut, all short and cute. Patty, Patty, you lovely bitch wolf queen, don't go. Huh? I beg your pardon? Like, what is this? Like, who approved this? Genuinely, why was this published? I just can't figure out if he's purposefully trying to be inflammatory or if he's being sincere, but like, who approved this? What is the point of this? Do editors not exist anymore? Because, like, why was this not edited? Oh, and there's also a Sharon Tate mention in one of the poems, which I personally feel is unnecessary and exploitative, but there's that. So this is what I mean when I say the collection is at its weakest in these poems, where he's not speaking from personal experience, or rather where he's not centering his own experiences in the public light. In a lot of recent poetry collections I've read, there's been this thing where poets include poems that are really short and or meaningless, and it always makes me think that they had to reach a certain page count, so they just added those, and this collection is no exception. So we have the poem The Sad Little Fashion Boy, which goes, I hate being late, but I hate being underdressed and unnoticed more. That's it. That's the whole poem. There's also this one. Don't just skip to this poem. Read the others first. In praise of whores. If this isn't you, read on. Like, what is the point? These poems just feel so lazy. Like, genuinely, what is this adding to the collection? Then there are the poems where he's just listing things, like this one, sex as competition, sex as a combat sport, sex as theater. And it just goes on and on. And like, I don't know, but to me, that's just not a poem. Like, you're just writing a sentence. Or there are ones where he's making odd statements that I'm not sure if they're rage bait or what. Like in Idol Worship, he says, Jesus was the original heartthrob. Whenever I see him on the cross, I think, I wonder what his ab workout was. So he describes one of the poems in this collection as less of a poem and more of an observation. And yeah, I would argue that this is the case for most of the poems in here. A lot of these poems just go on, and he's not saying anything, like this one called The Insect Fatality Forensic Department. He writes, all the bugs keep dying in my apartment. I even saw a dead lizard once, its gizzards displayed on cold concrete, like some perverse morgue for tiny animals. The spiders are the worst. They're 8 legs, they're like hairy tentacles, all curled up into a ball. I mistake them for little black threads till it's too late, and I've smashed them to bits with my fingertips. I have to figure out why they keep dying. It isn't natural. I also can't rule out the idea it might be paranormal as well, the dead bugs. Yeah, that might be it. Maybe that old voodoo doll I brought back with me from Peru has some sort of demon in it, put there by some bone-faced shaman in order to curse rich white voyeuristic tourists who summer there by killing their pets. That could make sense. Like, genuinely, what are you talking about? I know I've been critiquing this collection a lot, but like I said at the beginning, I didn't hate this because there are some gems in here. For example, there's a poem where he talks about what it's like growing up idolizing and having crushes on certain celebrities and then becoming yourself one of the celebrities that this gets done to. It was interesting to see him grapple with this realization that certain celebrities were a part of his sexual awakening and that he then became that for so many people. He writes, ought to be a part of, to be honest. Strange to be that for you. Now I look at all those people that I used when I was younger to build who I am. All that raw sexual data I abused. All the people behind the development of my desire. All that muse, and I get confused. In connection with this, he talks about the fact that random people just send him unsolicited nudes because when you're a celebrity, that's just something that happens and you're supposed to accept it as part of the package. What kind of people send nudes to celebrities? All kinds of people, it turns out. I've seen the inside of so many strangers. He also talks about what it means to be seen as a heartthrob. You are meant to act like a heartthrob, Avan, so why don't you? And how people are never going to be satisfied with you because everyone has a different definition of what a heartthrob is to them. And so how could you possibly be that for all those people? You can't project your own personal version of a heartthrob onto me. So to wrap up, I actually do think Avan has the potential to write a really solid collection. He has a knack for poetry, in my opinion. There are some good poems in here, and you can definitely tell he's passionate about writing. I just think that celebrities need to have their work more diligently edited because a lot of these poems either don't fit the theme or need heavy editing. I am interested in seeing what he puts out next, though.
Oh, make me over.
Let's move on to the Diaries of Courtney Love. To start off, let me just say that I'm not necessarily a fan of Courtney Love. I honestly don't really know that much about her. I've heard that she is problematic, but I genuinely don't keep up with these things, so I don't know. I just picked this up because I think she's an interesting figure and I hear lots about her. And I also just wanted to learn more about her band, like more about their music, and this sort of helped me get into their albums, which I'll get more into in a second. So yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way first. But yeah, so this book reminded me a lot of Girl Interrupted. So I think if you enjoyed Girl Interrupted, you might like this. The format of this book is that it's essentially just her collecting old diary entries and like things that she wrote down with a bunch of pictures that she has. It kind of feels like a scrapbook, almost like a coffee table book, something you would just casually flip through, not necessarily sit down and like read all in one sitting. For me personally, I don't like the style of presenting paintings and entries without context, like without explaining why what we're looking at is important. And so I wish that she would have supplemented those entries with reflections. Additionally, some entries are just really hard to read, which again is also why I'm not a fan of the style. But yeah, like they're super hard to read because written in her own handwriting and they're not dated. So it's really hard to know like the timeline of what I'm looking at. However, on a lot of these pages, she'll just include like pages cut out of a notebook where she wrote down some of her favorite songs, which I just thought was so cool because like to think about the fact that you had to write down the songs that you were interested in or that you liked because there was no Spotify. Like you couldn't just add them to a playlist. You had to physically keep track of everything that you like or wanted to listen to. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I mean, if you're looking for song recommendations from Courtney Love, this gives you that. Now, some of these notes are very rough and incoherent, so I'm not really sure why they were included or what we're supposed to take away from them. They do provide some context as to the inspiration behind her music though. For example, some of the notes go into her fraught relationship with her mom. So she writes, I feel kind of nervous about writing her. I don't know, when I get around her, I feel so awkward and timid and weak, and I always find myself trying to prove to her that I can make friends and be popular, even though she lives on the other side of the world. This theme does feature in Holt's music, such as the song Teenage Whore, which is from their debut album Pretty on the Inside. Courtney sings, when I was a teenage whore, my mother asked me, she said, baby, what for? I give you plenty, why do you want more? Baby, why are you a teenage whore? I said, I feel so alone and I wish I could die. I've seen the things you put me through and I wish I could die. Speaking of their music, I guess this is a good time to mention that prior to reading this book, I had only listened to one whole song, that being Jennifer's Body, and I really do like that song, but for some reason I never listened to the rest of their discography. So while I was reading this, and because of how confused I was, I thought it might help if I listened to some of their music while reading. So here's my review of their 3 albums. Their debut album was Pretty on the Inside. I enjoyed the lyrics, but the album is a little too loud for my taste. This sound is not one I particularly enjoy, so I would say this was my least favorite album of the 3, purely because I'm just not in an era where I want to listen to music that's this loud and this harsh. Okay, I now understand why this album is considered to be so iconic. I love the lyrics and the sound is way more up my alley. Though to be honest, it's still a little bit too loud for me, but it's better than Pretty on the Inside. My favorite songs are Jennifer's Body, Violet, and Doll Parts. Their 3rd and last album, Celebrity Skin. This is my personal favorite of their albums. I love the sound of it. It feels so summery. The lyrics are great as well. My favorite songs are Boys on the Radio, Celebrity Skin, Heaven Tonight, and Malibu. Okay, back to the themes explored in the book. I would say another big one is Courtney's fixation on beauty and struggling to feel beautiful. She writes, my body is my temple and doesn't need to be. Y'all, I literally can't read this. I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna read to you the parts that I can make out. By being sat in lye-filled baths every day and using detergent on my hair, no less dye, I want to be clean inside and out, sparkly and pure. It means parting with elaborate cosmetics. It hurts, but it's okay. I don't have to part with my clothes except the wearing of stiletto heels constantly and tight pants that cut off my circulation, and underwire whalebone bras. I don't have to part with anything except some rituals. How worth it will be. This theme also comes up a lot in her music, such as in the song Pretty on the Inside, where Courtney sings, "Slut kiss girl, won't you water her back? Is she pretty on the inside, baby pretty from the back? Slut kiss girl will have some wrought black strap. Is she ugly on the inside, baby ugly, ugly from the back? There is no power like my pretty power, my ugly." And also in the song Doll Parts, where she sings, "I am doll eyes, doll mouth, doll legs, I am doll arms, big veins, dog bait." I also found it interesting that she has a photo of Polish actress Paula Negri on a page. Paula Negri was a Polish stage and film actress and singer. She achieved worldwide fame during the silent and golden eras of Hollywood and European film for her tragedienne and femme fatale roles. She was also acknowledged as a sex symbol. Courtney also played Jean Harlow in a play, who was an American actress known for her portrayal of bad girl characters. She was the leading sex symbol of the early 1930s and one of the defining figures of the pre-code era of American cinema. This stood out to me because it reminded me of Taylor Swift's song Clara Bow. I think it's interesting that both of these women, who are heavily in the spotlight, resonated in some way with actresses from the silent era who were viewed as sex symbols or it girls of their time. The book does also have its silly, goofy moments, which show a different side to Courtney's personality maybe, like this part. "All hot men are tall. All hot women are short. Madonna, Kat, Kim Gordon, I am tall." Girl, me too. Or this one, where he says, "Man I most want to sleep with, W.B. Yeats." Like, she was so real for that. There was also this drawing of a baby in utero that I genuinely can't stop thinking about. Like, something about it is simultaneously haunting, yet also aesthetically pleasing. Like, I can't explain it, but I really like this drawing. And there's also this page, which stood out to me only because of one line, which is, "I will follow you down the sick drain." Because it's the same phrase that Julia Fox uses for her memoir, which I'll get to. And again, I think it's fascinating when people relate to similar figures or similar phrases, and it makes a lot of sense. Courtney, Taylor, and Julia, whether you like them or not, you face similar scrutiny and pressures of being an it girl or a sex symbol. So I find it interesting when I make these connections. It feels like the books are unintentionally in conversation with one another. However, parts of this book, especially given its format, do come across a bit performative. I say that because given how little context she provides, it was often hard to understand why she included a certain page and what reaction she wanted to elicit from the reader. Like, for example, this page where she's listing the things that interest her, and the first thing listed is Nazis. Why would she include this? Given the fact that it provides little to no context and leaves room for her words to be misinterpreted, or maybe perfectly interpreted, I don't know. It feels like it was added for shock value or to affirm the image of Courtney that the public has, but I'm not sure what the end goal is. This also happens at another point where she writes, I don't care, you can have my cake and my ice cream, just don't take me from," and then the rest is crossed out. Again, we don't know when she crossed out those two words, and we don't know why. Were they crossed out because she knew that no matter the answer, the public would judge her? Or were they crossed out to feed into public speculation about her? And I should mention that those words are placed right next to a photo of her and Kurt. So again, it's definitely interesting why those two words were crossed out. At the end of the day, even if this book was mostly performative, I do think that it contains a kernel of truth and does shed light on what Courtney most wanted out of her life and how ambitious she is. She writes, "My goals are to always feel brilliant about what I do, to have Christmas every day, to gain so much density and brilliance that as an actress I can find spiritual enlightenment, to afford a really creative maid to disappear when I want to, and to never give in to boredom, to have every day heaven and Christmas and work. In conclusion, unless you're a die-hard Hole fan, I don't think you'll gain much from reading this. It does have some interesting bits of information and gives more insight into Courtney's inspirations, but its format prevents it from being as detailed or in-depth as I would have liked it to be. At the end of the day, this does feel a bit like a cash grab to me. I feel like I expected more from a figure like Courtney and the knowledge that I'm sure she has and her experience in the public light. I just feel like she has the potential to write something way more impactful than what I personally feel that this is. On to the last book, and the one I'm most excited to talk about, Down the Drain by Julia Fox. I loved it. More so than I thought I would, maybe. The whole time while I was reading, I found myself thinking, this would make such a good adaptation, especially the first half of the book. I'll take a film or TV show adaptation. I'm not picky. I think if we can get Bling Ring era Sofia Coppola into the studio, she could do it. There's a part in the book where she describes going to live with her friend in Louisiana for a bit, and that whole part reminded me so much of the film The Sweet East, which essentially follows this girl as she goes on an Alice in Wonderland-esque adventure through the east of the US. This part of the book really gave me the same vibes because of the way that she describes her surroundings and how she ends up in Louisiana in the first place, which again just made me want to see an adaptation of it so badly. She also dedicates this book to the dreamers and the delinquents, which I thought was cute. The book starts with her recounting her visit to New York as a child, and she says, "Everything is so colossal here. The towering buildings cast shadows that stretch as far as my wide eyes can see, while the people who look nothing alike bustle around as if part of some grand dance. I'm a provincial girl from a small town where everything seems miniature in comparison. I feel miniature too, but not in an insignificant way. I feel small in a way that feels exciting. Like I have yet to be discovered." And I just thought that was such a lovely perspective to have. Like, just because you're small in terms of age or followers or whatever doesn't mean you're insignificant. It just means that there's so much potential for growth. One thing I really liked about this memoir is how honest it is. It is brutally honest. Almost too honest. Like, there were parts of this where I thought she could have kept this to herself. Like, I did not need to know this. And I don't want to read these passages out, so I will just pop them on the screen for you if you want to pause and read them. She doesn't shy away from sharing the unsavory parts of herself and her life. By which I mean that she's not afraid of coming across as unlikable, because some of these stories do not paint her in a very flattering light, but she still shares them. Like the time she kisses the guy that the girl whose family is fostering her has a crush on, and is then surprised when the girl gets mad at her for that. Or the time she calls immigration on this girl to get her deported back to Italy. I guess it's really courageous of her to share these stories in this much detail, because I don't know if I could do that if I was in her place. There's definitely a conversation to be had about whether she's including these stories as a way to self-reflect, by which I mean that it's not always obvious whether she's aware of how her actions come across to others. Sometimes she says or does things, and it doesn't seem like, at least to me, that she realizes that these things are not good or don't make her look good. I personally didn't really mind this aspect of the book because I don't need the protagonist to be likable. Her not being likable didn't take away from my enjoyment of the memoir. In fact, it was refreshing to see a celebrity expose these parts of themselves. But again, I can see why this was an aspect of the book that a lot of people didn't like. This book is also unexpectedly hilarious. Sometimes I'll be reading certain lines and they'll make me laugh so hard. And honestly, sometimes the situation isn't even funny, but the way Julia writes about it makes it so funny, especially if you just read those lines out of context. So there's, "Did I seriously just wait 16 hours to get slapped in the face in front of the dead Pope?" And, "Please God, Please send me a sugar daddy. I promise I'll be so good. I'll never do anything bad again. Like, she's just so funny. I know she mentioned that she didn't use a ghostwriter for the book, and you can definitely tell because her voice shines through, and the way each story is told feels very personal. Overall, I quite like the writing. I will say though, sometimes the writing was a bit cliche and could have been edited down, like this paragraph, for example. Sometimes you have to say fuck it and throw your life down the drain just to see where you'll come out on the other side. The most profound beauty emerges from the ashes of destruction. And by that, I mean that sometimes you have to burn your life to the ground in order to experience the life that is truly meant for you. It is in letting go that we are forced to carve our own destiny. We must be willing to relinquish all we once held dear if we are holding on with fear. If you believe in the power within yourself, anything is possible. Because the truth is, anyone who is someone first started out as a delusional dreamer. And like, yeah, this is nitpicky and it's ultimately not a big deal, but it's just something that stood out to me. Another thing that stood out to me is that sometimes she says things and it just comes off a bit delusional, for lack of a better word. Like at one point she writes, "The worst feeling is seeing a fashion show entirely inspired by me and not receiving an invitation, being purposefully excluded from the conversation when I single-handedly started every trend of 2022 is annoying." And listen, maybe I was just not keeping up with the trends in 2022, but really, every single trend? Again, maybe she's right. I don't know, but saying she did that single-handedly feels like an exaggeration to me, but I don't think she means it like that. What I found the most interesting about the memoir, though, is the gender of it all. Like, obviously, her experiences and the things she goes through are heavily influenced by the fact that she's a woman, and I found the conversations around that topic both fascinating and a little disappointing. I'll start with the interesting bit. At one point, she describes the relationship she got into with a sort of sugar daddy figure. He wasn't really her sugar daddy, but he would buy her a lot of things and pay her rent and stuff. Anyway, when she talks about him, she writes, "He tells me to stop biting my nails, so I do. He says my arms are too hairy, so I get the hair lasered off. He's the painter and I'm the canvas. And he's painting his greatest masterpiece, so I better not interfere. His nickname for me is Poupée. It's French for doll. And I'm starting to feel like just that, a doll that he can dress and play with. Or a caged animal, but the cage is platinum and encrusted with diamonds, and nobody feels any sympathy when I complain about it." I just thought that was so interesting because it reminded me of Priscilla and her relationship with Elvis, because she was essentially his canvas. You know, he dressed her the way that he liked. He made her do the hair the way that he liked. And it's crazy how aware men are that this is what they're doing, to the point where he literally called Julia his doll. There's another part where she recounts how male attention has affected her throughout her life. And she ends that paragraph by saying, "I don't want men to like me anymore. I'm over it." And I found that really relatable. I think it's something most women go through, having to figure out who you are when you stop performing for the male gaze. And I know Julia talks a lot about how her style has changed and how men don't like the way she dresses anymore. The part I found disappointing is that she can be aware of the way men treat her and the misogyny she experiences, and then turn around and describe other women in ways that are unnecessarily judgmental. For example, when she talks about going to a party with the artist, she talks about the other women at the party writing, "As I look at all the other girls, I realize I'm not like them. They're beautiful, but they willingly fade into the background, waiting for their come up. They're party decorations, ornaments to be admired. I'm not like that anymore. I already had my come up, and I'm not going back to being objectified and used as fuel for the egos of insecure men." I just really dislike the separation that she creates between the other girls and her, because as she says, she used to be one of those girls. So why not have compassion for them instead of wanting to be separated from them? It felt like another version of Not Like Other Girls to me, especially the willingly fade into the background part, because like, how would you know that? How would you know they're doing it willingly. I'm sure that when she was in their place, she wouldn't have described herself that way. So yeah, I just wish that aspect of the book had been handled a bit better. In conclusion, I didn't pick this up because I'm a fan of Julia. To be honest, I didn't really know much about her before reading this, aside from the memes, of course.
I mean, I was Josh Safdie's muse when he wrote Uncut Gems.
Right.
But everyone was talking about how insane this book was, and I'm nosy, so I needed to know what everyone was talking about. I love drama and a good story, and this did not disappoint. And yeah, these are the 3 books that I read. Honestly, this was pretty fun. I don't regret reading any of these, even if some of them I didn't enjoy that much. But yeah, I feel like all 3 were definitely better than a lot of other celebrity books out there. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what you thought. And yeah, if you have any recommendations for other celebrity books that you want me to read, I can totally do that. So let me know. And yeah, that's all I have for you today. All right, bye.